and welcome to The Caption Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. Hey everyone, and welcome to The Caption Life for a very special live episode that we're doing tonight. And I am joined by one of the co-owners of Outsider Comics, a local comic shop out of Seattle, Washington. Please welcome Wing Mui. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Hello.
I was worried that I was going to mess that up, so I'm glad I got that correct. But thank you for joining the show. I'm really excited to talk to you about your shop because I know your shop has a really interesting and really cool thing about it. But I wanted to start off by asking you, which is what we ask every guest that we have on the show, your comic book origin story. Wing, tell us a little bit about what got you into comics.
Sure thing. Also, thank you for having me here. It's great to be on a podcast. It's always great to be on a podcast, especially one about comics. So my origin story, I don't know. I don't remember what the first comic book I've ever read was, probably because I was probably a very small child. If I have to bet money on it, I am going to guess it is one of the many copies of Doraemon lining the streets, lining the newsstands on streets that are just like, everywhere in the world, given that it's one of Japan's greatest export comics that especially, I probably should have said this first, that I was born in Hong Kong. And so a lot of the Western sort of, is that correct? Western end of the Pacific, like a lot of folks kind of in Southeast Asia and East Asia, our first exposure to comics was really just Japanese manga that's been exported and translated. And so I guess it's one of those. The first time that I would actually own, possibly own/read an American what we would consider like an American comic or an English British comic was, sadly they no longer exist, but Modern Myths, a comic book store that was in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Right, yeah.
That was my first local comic book store when I was in college. And so the first comic book that I own, I don't remember what it is, but I know I got it from the pre-owned like back section of that comic book store.
That
And
is so cool.
It kind of got me into comics and also games, because it was a store that was like about a mile away from a women's college, Smith College in Northampton. So kind of the gender mix of that store and also the culture of that store was a lot different than your stereo comic book shop in the 90s or like early 2000s. And they were kind of like one of the earliest shops that really had a women-dominated kind of clientele. And I think that really reflected like in their culture, and that really drew me into it. So that's my origin story. Hello?
Yeah. Are you there?
I am there.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So it like switched on me for some reason. Sorry.
That's totally fine. But yeah, no, my origin story, read a whole bunch of books as a kid from newsstands, and then Modern Myths, RIP, they closed I think in 2010 or something. But that was my first local comic store.
That's awesome. Yeah, you know what's interesting is I've never been to Modern Myths, but I feel like I've heard about Modern Myths from somebody. I can't remember if it's from one of our people from Comic Watch, which I don't know if you
Mhm.
know this, Wing, but Caption Life Show is part of the Comic Watch, which is a
Right.
website for comic
Mhm.
reviews and stuff like that. And I know we have quite a bit of people from the East Coast. And I feel like I've heard about that shop from somebody there.
Mhm.
But that's a really cool story, and I love hearing that. You remember vividly your local comic shop, because I know when I was growing
Mhm.
up, I don't think I really had one. Like my introduction to comics was my uncle who had, you know, long boxes of comics and everything, and so
Mhm.
I don't even remember when I started buying comics, like where I was getting them from, because I didn't really know what a local comic shop was until
Yeah, I
I
think
got
it
older.
helped. I think it helped that I didn't really start until like my late teens, early 20s.
Hmm.
So I think that helps with the memory a bit. Like they're like it's not really a vague childhood memory when it's just like, all right, I guess the first time I'm regularly buying comics is like I'm like 20.
Right.
Cool. It's like I some people don't remember anything from college. I still have most of that memory intact.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of local comic shops, as I mentioned earlier, you are the
Mhm.
co-owner of Outsider Comics,
Mhm.
and one of the things that you all have made on your clear on your website, and
Mhm.
obviously this is a cornerstone of your comic shop, is that your Outsider Comics is a trans and queer owner.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, trans and queer owned local comic shop,
Yes.
which I think that's really neat. And I'll be honest, I think that's probably the first local comic shop I've heard that has
Mhm.
that is trans and queer owner, or
Mhm.
trans and queer owned. And so I want to ask you a
Mhm.
little bit about, what is it about Outsider Comics, with it being owned, being trans and queer owned, that makes it, unique and different compared to other local shops or even small
Mhm.
businesses and things like that. Why is that something that's really important for you all, in terms of making that as part
Mhm.
of your local comic shop's identity, for people to know that that's what you guys are?
Mhm. So first I want to be clear that we're definitely not the only one or the first one even in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Our friend Nick, who actually inspired us to really get the shop. He owns Phoenix Comics in Seattle. Sorry, they
Oh,
own
okay.
Phoenix Comics in Seattle, and
Yeah.
I am I know at the very least that that is definitely another LGBTQ owned shop.
Mm-hmm.
Their shop is kind of right in the historic queer kind of area,
Mm-hmm.
Capitol Hill in Seattle. I can't speak for that shop, but I think for us, we really wanted to make sure that we create this space for people to kind of come in and just say, hey, like the first review. So, are you like? Can I take a tangent and kind of just go back on a little bit on the history of the shop a little bit?
Yeah,
Because I
definitely.
think that
Yeah.
that'll be helpful, like in to put it in context. So the store outside of comics has been in Seattle since. Okay, I can't do math, but the seventh anniversary is coming in July. Sometime 7 years ago, a local couple, huge comics fans, they did a Kickstarter and fundraised for a comic book store, and also like a boutique that sold games and clothing and jewelry and just like cool geeky things.
Mm-hmm.
And they ran the store for a little bit over 6 years, but unfortunately they weren't able to do that, both like because of the pandemic and the economy and also other personal issues. So they publicly solicited for buyers for the shop last October of 2022, and that's when we bought the shop.
Okay.
And by we, I mean at that point it was myself and my co-owners, co-workers, Marguerite and Russell. The
Mm-hmm.
three of us we saw that and we got the shop. And the big reason why the old owners didn't want the shop to just go away, and like they could have just said, okay, we're liquidating everything, gonna file for chapter whatever and just get rid of it. And we could have just said, yeah, we're not going to buy, we don't really want to take on that risk. But one big thing is that over the last 6 years, when they had the shop, they slowly built it as sort of a safe haven
Mm-hmm.
for people, especially kids, right, who are queer people, trans people, and just kind of the shop just got that vibe of being a safe place for people
Right.
in the kind of North Seattle. And so a big reason of why they wanted to sell it is to keep that around. And the big reason we bought it is to keep that around because we were all customers we were all former customers and employees of the shop over the last n years, and so we didn't want that space to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where the continuity came in. And we worked out a deal kind of and we secured funding from folks who wanted to see the space, who wanted to see the space continue to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And we work with the old owners because they I'm I'm like 90% certain, but not 100% certain that the old owners were not queer or trans themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they were going, oh, we're selling to an entire trans non-binary group of people, like that's very appealing to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we worked out a deal amongst all these parties, and that's when we got the store. And so like even before we purchased the store, it was really clear that like from both customers and people who are behind the scenes that folks value having a store like this in the community,
Mm-hmm.
and both as sort of a safe haven and a space that and a store that essentially stocks things that maybe most other stores wouldn't.
Right.
Yeah, and I had a parent yesterday coming in, and anecdote is not data, but we got a bunch of anecdotes. And one of them was I was working a counter, and a parent came in and said, my child's transitioning like right now, and I want some books with like trans men, trans boys as the hero, like as a role model, or
Mm-hmm.
things about like things about transitioning, because the world is getting it's still is quite stressful and hard to be a trans person in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
but corporations has also figured out that trans people and people who support trans people have money. And so they're still willing to sell us things. So, they were going, okay, we do see like a little bit of like trans related stuff when we go to something like Barnes and Noble, or yeah, like another like large chain store,
Mm-hmm.
right, or like a general bookstore. And but what little they have, they're mostly about trans women or like older trans women, like
Mm-hmm.
memoirs or things like that. And so it was just like, well, let's look at our display. And there are things that for example, things written by local authors, and
Oh,
also like
cool.
things written by created by younger people that were either self-published, or like it's a small print run of a rep comic or things like that that we could offer them. And they were like, yay, like this is great. Like we also had some bigger name stuff, right? Like I was thinking like the Witch Boy series.
Mm-hmm.
And but also there's like, hey, here's some like smaller things. But like they got a stack of books and they left, and it's just like, yeah, they're like, I this wouldn't have happened in Barnes and Noble,
Right.
right?
Right.
This may not even have happened in one of the other comic book stores that they may have visited, like in surrounding neighborhoods. Like, not to say that like, right, other comic book stores don't stock stuff like that, but we just have different specialties,
Mm-hmm.
right? And ours is, hey, we stock a lot of queer and or indie stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want all the Batman, we don't have space for all the Batman. So like, but we still love Batman. But like, go to our neighbor. Like, just we'll give you that business card.
Right.
But so like, just having a space like that that can people can find specialized resources. Like, we had a therapist who came in, just kind of like going, wow, like you're the one shop that we would expect to stock these books, these resources on trauma, right? On childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
graphic novels that can help kids and also adults, work through things that they have experienced that maybe weren't that great. And that's another thing that we've kind of been known for over the last 6 years is we stock things that folks that fit our vibe, like not necessarily just gay, lesbian, bi, queer, trans, non-binary, but also folks who are neurodivergent, folks who are folks who are geeky, a little bit weird, not. It's called outsider because it's not a mainstream shop, right? We are
Right.
not. We don't. We don't necessarily do all the mainstream things, and so kind of I think having going back to your question, now that I've like went on the whole tangent
No, that
slash
was great. Yeah.
surrounding it, right? I think the two big things is, we're able to specialize and curate a collection
Mm-hmm.
that, some people can't, buyers and all book people who order books or general comic book store may not really even envision or
Mm-hmm.
think about, because it's just not you know, the Diamond previous catalog isn't going to normally recommend that to you. So, like, unless you're part of the community or you have a lot of connections in that community, you may not even know about. And also to create like that safe space of like, hey, like, um if you are like, I don't care if you are like, a 7-year-old coming in looking for something, or a 70-year-old going, I spent the last 70 years not having actually read comic books. Maybe it's time to start. We're happy to help you. We don't want we like we our kind of one of our slogan is for comics for every age,
Mm-hmm.
right? And comics for every vibe. Comic for everyone. Like, we want to get you started.
Mm-hmm.
Um, pa- on it partially so we can sell you books. I mean, let's be real. There's also that, like, we
It's
want
a
to pay
business.
rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a business, but also like we love comic books.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't, and we
Right.
want you to experience you should experience the joy of seeing triumphs, the relatable characters, the hashtag relatable content,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to find that for you.
That's
And I
awesome.
think having that space here really allows that.
Yeah. I love so
Mhm.
hearing you talk about outsider comics and what you mean for the community. I love how your shop, the way that you've just described it, is it's much more than a shop, but it's a just like what you said, a safe space in the community for people who, you know, it's definitely for trans and queer and members of the LGBTQ, but as you said, like people who might just feel like they're an outsider in whatever capacity.
Mhm.
And I love hearing that because I know local shops, try to build a sort of community, and it tends to be around comics. But I love how yours is kind of, yes, we're about comics, but this is also part of it. And so it kind of has that, space for people. As you said, people are coming to your shop specifically because of the fact that it is a trans and queer owned shop, and that's the community and that's the safe space that people are going to. You've shared a couple stories already about how people come to your shop. Has there been a instance or experience where you have had as a co-owner with like somebody who come into the shop and was like looking for something, or was asking for resources or whatnot, and it really made you feel like this is what we were envisioning, this is what we are hoping for, and we were able to do that for like this person, just some sort of experience that kind of really stands out for you?
Yeah, I think so. Let me Let me think. Let me think.
Yeah, and I put you on the spot on that. I didn't.
It's
I
okay.
apologize. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that part of me just wants to like pick up the phone and call my coworker who's at the shop and be like, "Yo, like I know you got a good story, but I don't remember." No, I'll give you another thing that actually happened last night. Um,
Okay.
Sort of not a very specific, not like this is your question, but like
Mm-hmm.
I think my answer's like a little bit off, but I think it's getting at what you want to get at. So let me give you this. We got so last night, like right before closing, just a two people, an older person and a younger person. I don't know if they're a family or whatever, but like two people came in and they were just like, oh, like this shop seems really cool. And they just started browsing
Mm-hmm.
and they started browsing and they started just kind of grabbing more and more books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in the end, like, they put down the books and I was just like, hey, like, cool. Like, I haven't seen you before, but, I don't work, I only work like, once, 1 or 2 days a week on average. So I'm like, I don't know everyone. I'm like, hey, I haven't seen you before. Like, are you part of our like loyalty program? You want, and if not, if you want to sign up, and they're like, I forget which state, but they were like, we're from rural either Idaho or Montana,
Oh, okay.
and they're just like, and we are sort of in a, I wouldn't like, not the most touristy area. We're not like next to the Space Needle. We're
Right.
not, but we're also in a pretty touristy area. Like there's like a night, like a nice canal and park and like some statues and just like a really cool neighborhood that tourists come. So tourists come in all the time, and they say, "Oh yeah, I'm from California" or whatever. So, but I wouldn't say the surprising part, but I guess like the gut wrenching slash heartwarming part is they kind of said it in the, like, in that we're from rural Idaho and Montana, and things aren't that great right there for us kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire stack of books is just like things that are from our pride display, things about, you know things on sex education,
Mm-hmm.
like things are just, and then there are just some like cute cozy things that have maybe some like queer characters in them, but like, so they were just kind of like, yeah, we don't have a shop like this near us, and we're really glad if we found you while we were here, while you're here, because even sometimes you just don't even expect that. If you're like, okay, I'm going to like a sort of a more liberal, larger, more liberal city, but people kind of don't expect us, and then they find us, and it's always kind of like we have like this moment where they have the, God, we found all these books and it's amazing. Like we found all these things we didn't even need, know we wanted. And then I'm going like, oh my God, I feel like things probably suck for you at home right now, at least like, but I'm glad you're fighting a good fight, and I'm glad we can help you, get some books home, and either, just so you can read them and just like enjoy them, or like, have you lend them to your friends and like, spread some spread some spread some joy and spread some knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of related to that, we also have, like, I've had a person tell me in the store going like, she's a trans woman who's from the the deep south. Like, I don't remember where it was, but it was the deep south, and she was here for a job interview, um because she wanted to get her family out of the deep south.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like a couple months ago, so it's still pretty recent, but enough laws have passed that she's just like, we need to get out of here, and Seattle's one of the places she was looking at. And it warmed my heart when she came into the store, and like, she grabbed a bunch of stuff as souvenirs for her kids, and just went like, she's just like, I wasn't really sure that I wanted to move to Seattle, but
Mm-hmm.
then I saw, But then I came into the shop, and knowing that a place like this exists really, it really helped her like realize that the you know in a city where we can support shops that are kind of that have this vibe, like this kind of cozy supportive queer vibe, that it's like, hey, like, yeah, maybe there are other problems in the city, but it's a place where she and her kids can probably start finding some community.
Yeah.
So I think, and she's not the only person that's told us that. We've had folks tell us that, like, we're one of the reasons why they moved to Seattle. Seattle was a city of transplants, honestly, in the last 10, 15 years. And
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to be the reason when people are going, yeah, like we think we like the city because we like your shop, or, like, you know, this is like we found like something in the shop that we didn't know existed, and that makes us feel better about either moving here or like the community here. And I think that's kind of the most heartwarming thing. I try not to cry whenever that happens,
Right.
because I'm
Yeah.
like crying. It's like, do you want a receipt? Do you want to? I can't see the receipt button because of all the tears.
Right.
Yeah. hmm
That's
So
that.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Like I love
Mhm,
hearing that because again, your shop, because of what it does and what it represents,
mhm,
has clearly been changing people's lives and giving them opportunities that they wouldn't be able to find elsewhere where they're from and everything. And so that's amazing to hear that. Thank you for sharing that
mhm.
story. I absolutely
You're
love
welcome.
that. That's great.
Yeah.
um we had talked a little bit about
Mhm,
how your shop is worker owned, and I know you
mhm,
had said that you get a lot of questions about
mhm,
if you're worker owned versus co-op. Do you want to talk a little
mhm.
bit about, well, one, like, you guys are worker owned, and how's that different from
Right.
co-op, and some of those nuanced differences, and why you guys are worker owned versus co-op?
Yeah. So I think the two. It's weird because we call ourselves a worker-owned comic book store,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that is a legal thing, and part of that is also like a marketing clarification thing.
Right.
So when people think of, like, I think it's getting more, employee co-ops are getting more common now, but in the last, I would say, 10, 20, 30 years, when Americans think of a cooperative, a co-op, it's usually a something that the customer or the person who patronizes the business is part owner of the store or the entity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the biggest examples are like farmers co-ops, right?
Mm-hmm.
You pay $100 to kind of buy a share in that co-op, and you shop there, and you'll get dividends or kickbacks. REI, the sports equipment one, is another big one.
Mm-hmm.
um or like credit unions also, it's kind of falls under the umbrella in terms of like in terms of how it works. It's like when you're a member of a credit union, you're kind of both an investor and a patron, like, so
Mm-hmm.
you and all the other employee and all the other people who deposited money into it have equity in that credit union or that farmers co-op or the store or whatever. And that's been the biggest kind of co-op that existed in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And employee co-ops, where essentially it's employees who own the store, either basically by investing their own money, or they kind of use sort of sweat equity. They um, work co-ops where your share in the co-ops is determined by both amount invested and hours owned, things like that. I
Mm-hmm.
would say that's a relatively new thing in the last couple of decades. Like, Seattle didn't have its big one until, like, I think it was like 5, 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Seattle is kind of a city that would really, where like that kind of thing like fits our culture. So it's been, that's one reason why we don't say co-op, because when we first kind of bought the place and we call ourselves a co-op, it's like people like, oh, so like how do we sign up for membership and whatever? And I was like, okay, it's an employee co-op, not the same thing. Maybe we won't say that. And the other thing is that uh, because co-ops kind of a bigger thing now, it is like there is like an actual business, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant. This is just my limited understanding from talking to lawyers and accountants, so this is not legal advice.
Right.
But there is like a legal cooperative entity. So there's,
Mm.
like enterprise, limited liability company or corporation or whatever. But now there's also like a cooperative like entity
Mm-hmm.
in at least the state of Washington and some other states too. And we're not that because there's a lot of paperwork, and when we were setting out, it's just like, oh, there's enough paperwork. We don't need more paperwork. Especially also we were trying to like buy the store immediately, so
Right.
we can like that store can keep going. So we're not legally a co-op. What the way that the way that we work and some other co-ops that I've talked to work is that the all our employ all our employees, um, once they work, unless they are a founding member, because then you can't have worked a minimum number of hours yet. Once they have worked 40 hours, they're eligible for co-op membership. And in our case, the way that we define co-op membership in our bylaws is that they become an equal owner of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're small enough that we don't really want to do the weight everyone's like votes or whatever based on the amount of hours they work or the amount of money they uh, bring in or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that once you've worked 40 hours, you are eligible to become a member of the co-op, a co-owner of the company, and we take a vote on it. And with a unanimous vote of current members, we get a new member. And
Gotcha.
the 40-hour kind of initial thing is both to make sure that, hey, like, it's kind of like a trial period, except we're not a large corporation and we're not just hiring people for the trial period and then kicking them out and not giving them like a real amount of money, because
Right.
hiring is hard. And and we also like, being a soulless corporation is kind of the opposite of what we want to do. But anyway, so once we kind of get through that, it's like, hey, make sure we fit the vibe. Like, hey, do you want to, like, now that you know how the shop works, you've done a bunch of things, like, is this a thing you really want to do? So it's kind of like gives us both a way to figure out if someone's a good fit, like whether it's like, do they want to do it, and also is it a good idea for the group. And
Mm-hmm.
once someone is a co-op member, and also contribute a sort of a token financial investment, and the token financial investment exists for basically a legal reason. We started at a much higher amount, but we've lowered it to kind of increase economic feasibility and accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of like lowered it to as much as we could, just so the IRS isn't like, hey, like, why does this person who hasn't invest money in this company, like, why are they a co-owner? Is there some legal shenanigans going on? So we want to make sure that like that doesn't happen, and that like there's like everyone has a minimal financial stake.
Right.
So that's kind of how our co-op works. Every co-op works differently, and this is the simplest model, we think, and it's something that we can really work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially what happens is everyone in the cooperative has voting powers.
Mm-hmm.
We're small enough that like we don't really, and we don't have a hierarchy in the sense that like, okay, one person's the CEO or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I am like, we all kind of, because we're small enough, currently we have 4 members and 1 employee. isn't a member yet. So there are five of us, like the four of us who are members. We're in charge of different, and through right now only three of us are active. For the other one person isn't for personal reasons. So it's kind of like the three of us. Take on we take charge of whatever role and make up whatever job like we all have this thing we do, and we just make up job titles whenever we need to like submit a job title.
Right.
It's like I was like I just made I was just doing like a application of something, and they needed a job title, and I'm like, okay, I guess social media manager, sure, that's my job title for today. I mean, like, I do social media, but like, that's not the only thing I do. But it's
Right.
so we all take charge, and we work cooperatively. Everyone has an equal vote, and we vote when big things come up. Like for example, like, hey, do we want to start do we want to start carrying more board games? Kind of like a big thing.
Right.
It is a big commitment. We have only currently a minimum amount of both board games. Do we want to actually increase that by like 400%? Or like, hey, like there's this publisher that's not really aligned with our values. Do we want to, as a group, say that we won't carry their products or things like, or the opposite? Let's say, hey, like, do we want to take a chance on the small publishers' products, even because they align with our values, even though we are not sure financially about it? So things like that, and that helps us kind of keep each other in track. We don't the Of course, the disadvantage of all this is that we tend not to be able to move as quickly as some as and we are just by virtue slightly more disorganized but than a shop that where it's just there's an owner and there's employees, and the owners make all the important decisions. But we have enough trust that we all make the medium decisions. But for big things, we still check in with each other. Having the internet helps. Like,
Right.
Discord is the best thing. Just always being able to just hop into a voice call, or like just like tag each other asynchronously or whatever. Like, that's been a lifesaver.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of how our place works, and yeah,
That's awesome.
it's a fun ride.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, and also I think the other piece I wanted to mention is that we specifically divorce financial contribution and voting power / equity, because all our investment is considered loans to the people who invested them. And this I actually learned working with cooperatives like years ago, like working with farmers cooperatives years ago when I lived in New England, that like kind of divorcing it so that people who don't have capital can still participate. And if someone lends us like $X,000 like to purchase the shop, for example, or if one of the members is like one of the people who invested some money in the beginning, it's like, just because we were able to invest more money in the beginning doesn't mean we get more voting power. And that the idea is we all work at a shop. We all, like, maybe some people do more hours than others, but we all work at a shop. We're all workers. We all should have the same amount of voting power. And if you invest money, well, you get money back, right? You get interest but you don't get equity. So we kind of divorce that. And a lot of our investors love that, which is kind of like they really enjoy that. They, especially since they're like, oh yeah, I don't actually want to run a comic book store, but if you're saying I can lend you money and you give me comic books later as interest, you give me store credit, I'm fine with that. So it's like kind of we work all that out. But yeah,
Right.
It's been a fun ride, both like kind of dealing with all of that, but just lawyers and accountants are still not very well versed in worker-owned companies quite yet. So
Right.
kind of a lot of new ground for both us and like people around us that we talk to.
Right. No, that sounds amazing. I love that idea
Mhm,
about it being worker owned in that capacity and some of the
mhm,
opportunities and community investment that you get from that. So I
mhm,
that is this the more I hear you talk about the shop, the more that I know I'm going to try to find an excuse to go to Seattle so I can visit you all there because this
mhm.
sounds phenomenal. Um, one thing I want
Seattle is pretty awesome.
yeah, yeah. Well, and my sister graduated from
Mhm,
a university out in Washington, so I know she'll probably go back out there. So sometimes when she does, I'll probably be like, "Hey, I'll tag along with you." So,
mhm,
so I wanted to ask you
mhm,
before we wrap up this special episode here that you're based in Seattle. My show is in Indiana, so this show is kind of like nationally spread out. It's not a local show by any means whatsoever.
right.
And I can imagine that people like myself or other people who might be listening to this right now are probably thinking, this is a really cool shop. Like, what's a good way if I don't live in Seattle or live
Mhm.
close enough to go visit and support you through, buying comics or anything like that? What's a good way for people to be able to show their support for your store and what you're doing over there?
Well, I mean, first of all, like what you're doing, just spreading the word. I think that's, you know, we're not a large store. We're a tiny shop, and I like our marketing budget is really small, and we kind of already spent most of it this summer.
Hmm.
So just spreading the word and telling folks about it is I think the most important thing. And you can also follow us on social media and things like that. Well, I know you already do, but like you as in those of you listening and are watching at home or wherever,
Hmm.
on a bus or something. I don't know. Um, and the other thing is that we do actually have an online store. Um,
Great.
we It is at shop.outsidercomics.com, or you just go to outsidercomics.com. We have a shop, and you can order through there. If you don't have a local comic book store, we do subscription services and special orders, and we ship nationwide. We
Mm.
actually have regular subscribers, even further east than Indiana.
Hmm.
We have someone in Arkansas. Like I don't recall, but we have folks kind of just all over the map who's
Uh-huh.
who may have lived in Seattle, and they just went, well, I'm moving to a place without a comic book store, so can I just keep my subscription and you send me a box of books once every month or two? So and we do that. We we just basically charge you cost of book plus cost of shipping. We don't charge extras. So if you're
Hmm.
looking, if you want to subscribe to things, you don't have a local comic book store, we certainly do that. And what a lot of folks have done is, if you have friends and family in Seattle, you can also like just go online on our site and buy a gift card and mail it to them as like a
Yeah.
nice little surprise, or whenever it's their next birthday. Like some if you know someone in the Pacific Northwest who may be interested in a shop, and like
Hmm.
we get quite a bit of that, and I'm just like, it's great because you know someone from like Boston hears about our shop and goes, oh, I can't go there, but I know my cousin is I know my cousin is in, I don't know, Tacoma. It's pretty nearby, and I know he's gonna enjoy the shop, so I'm gonna send him a gift card, and we do that. But yeah, like I think a lot of it is just like we are a small shop, and we we need to pay rent, unfortunately. It's
Right.
just like,
Yeah.
please, like if you want books and you want to get them from us, we're happy to get you. We're happy to get you things. We're happy to spread joy to y'all via the form of exchanging money for comics or games or uh, nerdy clothing or art from local artists. Just we have a bunch of things.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, Wing, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'll make sure
You're
to
welcome.
put links to your shop and to some of your social media in the show description
Mhm.
as well too. But thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on to talk about Outsider Comics. This is really, really exciting. I'm really happy for all the things that you all are doing and what you mean for the community. And thanks for coming on the show. And I will, I hopefully we'll, work together and keep supporting each other with all this. But again, thank you for coming on and sharing all the things about Outsider Comics and what you all are doing for the Seattle community.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been fun. After you reached out to us, like, I think it's a couple months ago now, and I actually started putting just like, okay, yeah, like it's a slow day, it's a slow Tuesday. Let's put on an episode in a shop while I shelve things. So
Oh, that's awesome.
thank you for keeping me company when things are slow.
Thank you for sharing that. That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
Hmm.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
You too. And that wraps up another episode of The Caption Life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on social media at Caption Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionlife.com.